everyone. Welcome to Track 2, Alternative Construction and Sustainable Infrastructure. My name is Maddie Burns, and I am the Program Manager for the College of Engineering, specifically for recruiting, career, and professional development. If you have any questions or if you're having any technical difficulties while you are in this track, please feel free to send me an email or you can use the chat box. If you have any questions throughout the track, please only use the chat box. Do not unmute yourself. That helps save our bandwidth. In addition to that, there will be a brief survey at the end of the track. I highly encourage you guys all to take it. It's 4 questions, and that will be located in the Zoom or in the virtual platform, and it will be right next to the staff tab. In addition to that, there are also some polls we have for you as well. These are also accessible in the platform as well. I will send instructions in the chat box on how to access both the poll and the survey. So with that, I would like to introduce Roy Gibson, and he will be our moderator for this session.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me this afternoon for the Alternative Construction and Sustainable Infrastructure session. My name is Roy Gibson, Vice President at Bohannon Houston and ASCE New Mexico Section Past President. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Wyatt and Andrew for sticking with us on the preparation of this presentation, which we originally planned to present last year. So you'd be driving through this construction right before you come into this big conference, but unfortunately, we did not have a conference at the location. However, over the past year, we have really seen the growth of the I-25 University project, the team working through the pandemic to deliver a successful project to the department and Southern New Mexico. Everyone on the team has truly created a miracle by working through the pandemic and getting this all completed. Wyatt Karchner is a fellow Aggie alumni and principal of the Molson-Corbin Southern Region. Mr. Karchner was the overall consultant project manager in charge of the I-25 University project that is currently under construction right at the doorstep to NMSU. Andrew Wong, another fellow Aggie, is a project engineer and Envision professional with Molson-Corbin out of their El Paso office. At this time, I would like to turn you over to Mr. Andreas Lenin, President-elect of the New Mexico ASCE New Mexico section and Technical Support Engineer for New Mexico Department of Transportation, District 1.
Thank you, Roy. Welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for choosing our session. Actually, I think our ASCE National President really put the ground settings for this presentation when he talked about the ASCE Infrastructure Report Card and the need for investment into our infrastructure. But we also have to remember that the resilience and sustainability of our future project should match our innovation that we have seen during the last time our nation was moving forward with such an ambitious plan. So we want to bring back Envision ISI, and today we want to give an example on a case study how this system can be utilized to prove to our investors, to the taxpayers, to our nations, really how we utilize or how we include sustainability into our projects. I know this is a process that we all do on a day-to-day basis, but we have a hard time justifying and documenting it. I want to give it over to Wyatt and Andrew, who will give us a case study on how the Envision rating system helped them to guide the planning, design, and construction of the I-25 University interchange. This presentation will show that sustainability is an important aspect of engineering and design and how it is woven into our current process and design practices. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Wyatt Karchner with Molson-Corbin, and I'm joined with Andrew Wong, also with Molson-Corbin. And so we just really appreciate you guys taking the time to spend with us this afternoon, and we hope that we are able to provide you with lots of information that'll help you in the future. And so I just want to kind of go through how we're going to go through this presentation just to set you guys up for how this thing is going to flow. First off, we're going to talk about what Envision is, kind of at a 30,000 foot level. We want to just kind of introduce that to you. Then we're going to get into the background of the I-25 University interchange, talk about, again, at a high level, why the project was needed. And then we're going to take a deep dive into the Envision credits and show how that each Envision credit really helps guide our planning, design, and construction process, and how that's really tied together with our location study procedures for the NMDOT and really good engineering practices. And then finally, we're going to close it out with some lessons learned and a challenge for you guys before having a question and discussion period. As mentioned at the beginning, we are going to have some polls. We do have a lot of time here for this session, and so we wanted to keep you guys engaged here. And so there's going to be 7 polls throughout this presentation, and so they're going to pop up on the screen for the presentation. But actually, if you go back to your conference portal, you will see for this session there's a tab that says polls, and those polls will then be available for you. So at this time, we're going to have the first poll question. And that first question is, have you heard of Envision? So we'll give you guys just a few seconds here to answer that question.
Just to read off the answers here, we have, yes, I'm Envision certified. Yes, I've been involved in a project. Yes, I've heard about it, but don't know much. No, that's why I'm here. And E, isn't that a Buick SUV? So it looks like quite a few of you have heard of Envision as a rating system. But for those of you that haven't, Envision is basically the equivalent of the LEED's sustainability framework, but really tailored to apply to horizontal infrastructure systems. LEED's, of course, is oriented toward vertical buildings, and it's a very effective platform for that sort of infrastructure, for that sort of building, but it doesn't really translate well over to roads or water systems. So back in 2011, a group of came together, the Zofnass Program for Sustainable Infrastructure, the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, and they helped form the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure. And so the purpose of Envision is to foster a dramatic and necessary improvement in performance and resiliency of our physical infrastructure across the full spectrum of sustainability. Envision provides a framework and incentives to initiate this systemic change. As a guidance tool, Envision provides industry-wide sustainability metrics for all envisioned infrastructure types. And while it was initially developed for the US and Canada, Envision is being applied worldwide. The first project was awarded in 2013, and Envision version 3 was just recently launched in 2018. So this graphic here gives a good representation of how Envision provides a holistic framework for sustainability for infrastructure projects. On the top here, you have the environmental sphere. So that's kind of the first leg of your three-legged stool. This, of course, is what people often think of first when they talk about sustainability. This is the natural resources, air pollution, water, energy, material usage. But Envision does a good job of not looking at only one aspect of sustainability, and it also balances it out by looking at other factors such as the economic factors. This is what often drives a lot of our projects right now, because obviously to be able to be successful with a project, you have to be able to do it within your budget and make a profit if you're in the consulting industry. But this also needs to be balanced out by the social realm, and that has to do with how do our projects affect our communities. So one of the things that Envision helps projects do is make sure that the focus of the project isn't tilting too heavily towards one or the other of these areas, to make sure that by the time you go through planning, design, and construction, you're able to deliver a project that is balanced and is truly sustainable. So the Envision framework is broken down into 64 credits in 5 different categories. The first category is quality of life. This affects that social element. It affects how is a project impacting the community, the mobility, the effectiveness, the well-being, the aesthetics of the context that the project is in. The leadership category has to do with the commitments behind a project. Is the organization's, the project team, do they have the commitment? Do they have the framework, the organization, and the planning to make sure that a project can be delivered effectively? Next, you have the resource allocation category, and this, of course, is one of the main ones people think about. How are you using your materials, your energy conservation, your water conservation? And of course, that's closely linked to natural world, which has to do with where your project is located in its environment and how it's affecting the natural world, the ecology, the biodiversity, of the surrounding areas. And then finally, that kind of all gets wrapped up in the climate and risk category. And this is looking into the future. You know, with the climate changing and the impacts that that is having on our world, we want to look at both the sides of our emissions and how we are contributing to that accelerated climate change, and also the resilience. Some of this is already happening. So how are we going to build our infrastructure in a way that can react and adapt to the changes that are coming?
So now that you guys know a little bit about what Envision is, I want to show you guys the project that we actually applied this Envision framework on. And that is the I-25 University project here in Las Cruces. It's actually located at Exit 1 on I-25 near the NMSU campus. Just to kind of locate folks on this map, here is the Pan American Center, the Aggie Memorial Football Stadium, and north is to the right on here. And so our project was really focused at the I-25 University interchange, but because it is an interchange, federal highway documentation requires that we look both upstream and downstream of the interchange in question to make sure that there aren't any adverse effects. And so our project limits actually extended all the way to the I-10, I-25 interchange to the south, and then to the north to the I-25 Loman interchange. And then we also looked east and west on University Avenue from Telshore all the way to Travis. We actually studied the entire university corridor to make sure that traffic was flowing smoothly with these improvements. But really the focus of the construction of this project is between right at the I-25 University interchange and between Telshore and Los Alturas. So the original interchange was constructed in 1960, and you can see the photo of the interchange being constructed here. The interchange was actually originally constructed with 2 bridges. So there was a bridge that carried eastbound university traffic and westbound university traffic over I-25. In 1988, there was a closure pour done to basically combine these 2 bridges into one single bridge. And then in 2012, additional improvements were made to the interchange to include a new ramp, the new loop ramp that was put in, and acceleration and deceleration lanes on the legs of the interchange. So what was really the driving force and the need for improvements on this project? And really all of those of us who are Aggies or live in Las Cruces know that when you're going to class prior to the pandemic on a weekday morning when school is in session, that I-25 southbound backs up significantly. You can see that in this photo here. And so that causes lots of congestion in the peak hour. So what the traffic movements show is that there's a lot of people that are traveling south on I-25, exiting at University Avenue, and then they are trying to scoot over quickly 2 lanes of traffic to turn left into the NMSU campus. Well, at that same time, there's a heavy volume of traffic on University Avenue it's also trying to go in this direction. And so that creates a lot of congestion and traffic at those places. We also had lots of pedestrian and multimodal issues that we needed to address. We'll talk about this a little bit more in detail later, but one of the things is that on University Avenue, there was only sidewalk on one side. There was no pedestrian railing on the bridge. Andrew will talk about how the bicycle lanes on the bridge were actually kind of terrifying. And so all of those things needed to be addressed. Also, there were some geometry issues with the southbound off-ramp. And then all of these things combined really created safety problems throughout this entire corridor. And so that really was the driving force behind this project. So this project was studied originally in the most near future in 2010 by Gannett Fleming West. And they came up with several recommendations and alternatives, one of which was the construction of the loop ramp. And that was put in to allow for northbound on-ramp traffic to have another alternative to access northbound instead of having a dual left turn lane, which was also a cause of congestion along University Avenue. They completed their study in 2010. They did a CE in 2011. And then out of that came the construction of the loop ramp and deceleration lanes in the northbound and southbound directions. But as we all know, changes happen quite frequently. And so when we started this project in 2016, there had been several things that had happened that had changed the way that this interchange needed to function based off of changes that had happened in the area. One of them was that I-25 had been widened to 3 lanes between University and Lohman. It was determined that a new bridge over I-25 was needed. If the DOT was going to spend a large amount of money on improving the interchange, they didn't want to leave an old bridge that was constructed in 1966. And so they wanted to go ahead and upgrade that bridge as well. One of the major components that changed was the way NMSU had configured their roadways and their roadway network. So with this alternative, all of the local traffic on University and Trevice would have to use Payne Street or Arrowhead. For those of you guys that are from this area, you know this is the road that separates the Pan Am Center from the parking lots to the east. However, since that 2010 study, NMSU has changed that. They're actually planning to close Arrowhead Drive or Payne Street in the future and only allow that to be accessible for special event traffic. And so that was really a change, as this alternative that was originally recommended forced all traffic onto that roadway. And then NMSU went through a pretty substantial change to their pedestrian and multimodal plan, which needed to be incorporated. And so when our team got this project, the DOT asked us not to go back to the very beginning of the study phase, but to, through the IACR process, look at various alternatives. And so based on where this project was located, one of the things that we determined early on was that there was really 3 partners in this. There was the NMDOT, which is obviously the owner of I-25 and portions of University Avenue. There was NMSU, which is located on the south side of the interchange, and then also the city of Las Cruces, which is located on the north side of the interchange. And so what we did early on is we created that stakeholder group and that collaboration, that group was with us from the very beginning, from the onslaught, from the planning all the way through design and construction. And so in our early meetings, one of the things that we wanted to establish was the project goals. And these are the 4 goals that we came up with. They were to provide access directly into the NMSU campus from I-25 southbound. And since we're going to be doing that, one of the things that came out of this was, well, let's put Trevice through there as well. Let's have a grade separation for Trevice that'll free up additional capacity at that signalized intersection at University and Trevice and help University itself have a better level of service. ADA and bicycle improvements was also a goal. We know that this area is continuing to grow. There's lots of pedestrian facilities here. And so we wanted to enhance that as much as we can. And then we went through this whole process of getting people into the NMSU campus. So we also wanted to do something to help facilitate getting them out of campus. And so one of the goals that we added was to provide access to I-25 southbound from NMSU. So what we're going to do now is we want to talk about the development of the interchange using Envision. So you guys have got the background of what Envision is. You've got the background of what the project is. And so we're going to kind of mesh those. So we want to show you guys how the principles of sustainability are woven into our lives as design engineers and how we can do little small things to improve sustainability.
So the first thing that we did for this project and have done on other projects now is using the Envision checklist. The Envision checklist is a tool that is free to anybody to use. You don't have to pay. You just need to sign up, make a free account on the Envision website through the Institute of Sustainable Infrastructure. And then you can have access to some of these basic tools. The powerful thing about the checklist is that it helps designers and planners be able to think through the various elements of a project beyond maybe the specific scope problems that have been identified. So that's something that we did very early on for this project. And as we walked through each of the credits, you can assign yourself a score as you read the description, and you kind of get an idea of some of the different things that you could do to improve the sustainability. This is where a lot of the brain juices start flowing and the ideas start popping out, because they're describing general sustainable practices, and then you're kind of merging it with your project. And a lot of times you start making a lot of connections that you hadn't made before. Oh, maybe we could do this for bicyclists. Oh, maybe we can improve light pollution. I hadn't thought about that. These are the types of things that that the checklist helped designers do. And again, this is a free checklist that anybody can do. You don't even have to verify the project. Once you determine the self-assessment kind of score, you can move on and get the project verified. So just for reference, this project was in the range of $30 to $40 million. And so that cost about $26,000 to verify. And that allows you to have access to the sustainability professionals that work for Envision, ask them questions, get clarification, get their expertise and feedback on specific areas. And we found that they were very helpful in the entire process. So what we're going to do is move through each of the credits now. We're not going to talk about all of them. So to start off, we have another poll here, which is about what the quality of life credit means. So you can open that up again on the website. We described this a little bit in the About Envision portion. So you can go ahead and go in there and fill in your answer.
I think this needs to have an all of the above, because tacos on Tuesday seem to be something that I would include in quality of life.
Yeah, I'm seeing here that tacos on Tuesday is almost winning next to the actual correct answer. So I'm proud of you all. You're good New Mexicans. This is the right answer. So again, yes, the quality of life, it's a very broad credit category, and it's meant to focus on the human impact of the project. A lot of times as transportation professionals, we're often thinking about cars. How do we get the most cars from one point to another point? How do we do it safely? How do we do it effectively and efficiently? But we have to remember that these projects are not about cars, they're about people. There are people in the cars. And so we're thinking about them, but the cars are also in a community. There's people who are not in the cars. We have to think about all these elements of a project. And so this category helps us be able to do that well. So our first credit that we're going to talk about is QL 1.1. Now we're going to talk about a lot of the credits. We're not going to go through all 64 because that would obviously take far too long. But this first credit, improving community quality of life, is a very general credit, and it kind of wraps up a lot of the elements of a project, of this project. So we're going to spend a good bit of time here. So again, the intent of this credit is to improve the net quality of life of all communities affected by the project and mitigate negative impacts to communities. So as you see here, this credit gives a good idea of how these credits are laid out. There are different metrics that you have to meet to be able to prove to ISI and Vision that this project meets this category. So we're going to talk about a few of these things, but for this credit, you have things like aligning with the community goals, identifying what those are, addressing your adverse impacts, involving the community in the design process, and then is the community satisfied, or are they about to throw a revolt against your project? And then finally, the most sustainable is to actually create rehabilitation of infrastructure and not just a bunch of brand new development. So obviously the first thing to do is to identify the community goals. And so as Wyatt mentioned, we did a lot of research and a lot of study into the why and the reasoning for this project. And there are a lot of resources out there. Most cities have transportation committees. And of course, the NM DOT has been studying and looking at this project for a long time. So we looked through all of these different entities' websites and their documents, and a few things began to pop out as being common goals among these different plans and priorities. These things were the things like direct access for southbound I-25 to the NMSU, the grade separation at Travis, and definitely from multiple places, we saw a lot of desire for better bicycle and pedestrian connectivity in the area. So with that, we began the IACR process. Now, the IACR is, of course, an FHWA requirement. The FHWA wants to protect the integrity of the interstate system, and so they want to make sure that any project that is affecting the interstate is going to be well studied out to make sure that there aren't going to be adverse impacts. And so this is a good example of how the existing processes in place are actually quite sustainable. They align well with sustainable practices. And so through this process, we had to analyze the existing and future year traffic model, and then compare that to each of the alternatives that was developed. And we developed probably well over a dozen different alternatives and advanced 3 or 4 of them to detailed modeling. And through that, we were able to determine that our preferred alternative improved on many of the different metrics of effectiveness, like level of service, vehicle hours traveled, vehicle mile traveled, and intersection delay, not to mention providing other benefits to the community. So as you can see here, this is one of the final renderings of that preferred alternative. This is basically what it's going to look like when construction is done. You can see here the new southbound off-ramp that peels off from I-25 and comes under University and ties into the roundabout on the south side, giving direct access to NMSU, as well as Travis, which does the same, avoiding the busy intersection with University. You can see here the pedestrian facilities, the bicycle lanes, the sidewalk that was added. And we felt that this alternative would be able to meet these community goals.
So one of the other aspects of QL 1.1 is to address adverse impacts. And this was something that our team really thought of right from the beginning of the project through the alternative analysis. So one of the goals that we set on this project right from the beginning was to maintain traffic in two lanes in each direction on University Avenue throughout construction as much as humanly possible, basically, so they could still construct this. And we also wanted to maintain 2 lanes of traffic on I-25 to the extent possible as well. We didn't know back when we were doing this design that we were going to live in a COVID world and traffic would be cut in half or less. But so we set these goals right from the beginning. And this actually started with our alternative analysis, because we knew right at the beginning that the only way that we could construct a new bridge over I-25 was to offset that bridge from the existing structure. And so we looked at alternatives of pushing the new bridge to the north of the existing structure or to the south. What we actually found through our analysis was that when we pushed the bridge to the north, not only were we able to maintain 2 lanes of traffic in each direction on University Avenue while the new bridge was being constructed, but it also allowed us to move this south roundabout further to the north, which minimized the amount of right-of-way take that was necessary. And so just little factors like that made a huge impact and reduced the adverse effects this project had. We also looked long and hard at the traffic control and the construction phasing and throughout this project. One of our goals that we wanted to do was to look at this entire project as a site. There's ramps and alignments and all kinds of things going on here. And so the earthwork became a real priority of our team to try to balance the earthwork as much as possible. And so it became a challenge not only from when do they need the earthwork and when do they need that material, but how do you maintain traffic at the same time? And so our team developed various plans here that we could make sure that we could build this, maintain the level of traffic, and have it sustainable from an earthwork perspective. And then something that we also wanted to do to minimize adverse impacts, because really those occurred during construction, was to make sure that the public was informed. And I'll talk about that more in just a few minutes. So one of the Envision credits for this as well is involve the community in the design process. This is something that the DOT already does a very good job of, especially with corridor studies. They have public involvement that's necessary for almost every project that we work on. And Envision recognizes that gaining that public support and that public involvement is really important to the community and to the project. And so I think on this credit, we were actually able to achieve nearly maximum points by just following the process that's in place right now. But we recognize that a project of this magnitude, we didn't want to just follow the original process of having a meeting with 25, 30 people show up with some placards. So we kind of took this public involvement to a different level. So we did in 2016, 2017, we started what we did virtual public meetings. I know that's kind of become the common thing now that we live in a COVID world, but at that time, these things were pretty new. And so what we did is we had a pre-recorded segment that included our stakeholders. So we had the design team, we had members of the NMDOT staff, NMSU staff, City of Las Cruces staff, all involved in this public involvement process. So they were able to record a session, and then we were able to have a meeting which really showed that our team was working together on that. So we did a combination of a live and pre-recorded session. You can see that we actually had the meetings at the City of Las Cruces council chambers. Again, more of that team and involvement that we had. And so we allowed people to ask questions in various ways. So people could actually come to the meeting live and they could ask questions just like they always do. We also took questions on Facebook, Twitter, email, and we even had a phone line that people could call in and ask questions. And so we were able to do this, and we were able to reach 500 people for both our public meetings that we had during the design process. And that's significantly higher than we would have had if we wouldn't have done it virtually. And one of the good things about this is people could go back and watch these meetings on YouTube. We posted them on our website, and they could go and look at the meeting. So if somebody wasn't available on the night of the meeting, they could still be informed. And we thought that was a very important process. So another credit that Envision looks at is how satisfied is the community. And this is kind of an impossible task. Nobody's ever going to be completely satisfied with a project, especially when you're putting in roundabouts. That's going to cause a lot of stir. But for this project, overall, we've had very successful public outreach. We've had, the community seems to be satisfied with the result. And just some metrics that we've had over 11,000 views on our website just during construction, with over 2,000 people returning to the website to get more information. And then we've had virtual public meetings, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, throughout construction, and all of the comments and questions that we have received have been very positive. And so overall, we have met this metric of community satisfaction. So because we started the public involvement during the design phase virtually, we wanted to continue that through the construction phase. And then it was actually kind of forced on us with COVID. So what we did for this project is we actually rewrote the special provision for section 618. And we put in requirements that the contractor had to hire a public relations firm. Those of you guys that have been involved in public involvement for construction know that the contractors are really good at building things. They're really not always that great at talking to people. And so a high profile project like this, we wanted to make sure that we had a public relations firm that was going to be available to answer questions and talk to people nicely, I guess is the best way to put it. And so what they did is they actually took our project website that we had for design and they carried that into construction. We actually had virtual public meetings that are held on the first Thursday of every month. So we go and record. And I want to give you guys a little background as to what you see when you're doing a public meeting nowadays. You don't see people out in the audience, you see all of this tech equipment. And so I want to give a good shout out to our technical folks that have been doing that from LCTV and CW Strategic Communications. They've done a great job of keeping us informed on the process, adapting to the process, and really getting people to the website and involved in this. So we've also created the Facebook page that we've maintained, the Twitter, and then something that's been important is we send out weekly construction updates throughout the project. So here's how our public outreach has gone through construction. And these are views of our monthly meetings. So you can see that we're averaging about 4,000 views per month on our construction public meetings. We actually had a meeting that had over 8,000 views. Our website, again, has had over 11,000 visitors. Our Facebook page, one of the things that's just kind of mind-blowing is that we've reached over 108,000 people on Facebook. Twitter, we've had almost 72,000 impressions. And we have an email list, which they get notifications every week on what the traffic is going to do through this construction zone every week. And if something changes, they get an email blast. And that has over 1,000 people on it.
So moving on to QL 1.2, this involves stimulating sustainable growth and development. So the intention of this project is to not just, this credit is to make sure that a project isn't just building a roadway, popping it down, and then getting out of there. And so the goals here are to increase the capacity, the effectiveness, the efficiency of a community and provide a means for additional job growth, as well as livability and attractiveness. So this is obviously, as transportation professionals, we're very good at making sure that we're getting just the one job done, but something that we want to make sure that we did for this project in particular, given the context and its relationship to the city, is we want to make sure that we were making this project attractive to the community as a gateway into the city. And another part of what we did here was to be able to do an in-plan analysis, which gives measures the economic output of a project. Now, this is something that was really neat to be able to see, because we know often, you know, the direct impact of a project, the jobs created by the contractor, by the design firm, and the money that goes into design and construction. But this analysis allowed us to be able to see how that output of the direct effect also has indirect and induced effects. So as you can see here, the direct effect of the construction cost of $36 million actually has an overall total effect of about $62 million. And I'm no economist, so I don't understand fully how this works, but when you spend money, it circulates in the community and has an overall net benefit. Another part that was interesting was just that the jobs created or expected to created weren't just limited to construction jobs, but also affected other things like trade, transportation, real estate, as well as hospitals and commercial machinery and manufacturing. And so this was a very helpful metric to understand the ways that this project benefits the community.
Playing off of this is QL 1.3, which is developing local skills and capabilities. And something that I think is very unique about this project is that there were a large number of local companies that were involved right from the beginning. Molson Corbin has an office in Las Cruces. Our design team has Bohannon, Houston, and Wood, they both have offices in Las Cruces. And a lot of us are actually Aggie alumni. We actually have Dr. Lomler on our team, who is a professor at NMSU as well. And then the NMDOT staff, City of Las Cruces staff, is also largely made up of NMSU grads. And so that was really something that was unique about this project. And then furthermore, the artist that was selected that we'll talk about more in a little bit, she is also an NMSU grad and a local Las Cruces native. And our contractor, La Colorita, is also a Las Cruces-based company. And so because we are all Las Cruces-based, we realized that the collaboration and that growth of the job force was going to be important. And so we teamed with the NMSU College of Engineering to use this project as their capstone class. As I mentioned, Dr. Lomler is a professor at NMSU, and so he was really great at spearheading this project for them. And so they didn't look just at one aspect of this project, but they had various disciplines within the civil engineering department look at this. So they analyzed the bridge, they did drainage analysis, foundations, and soil stabilization, and they were actually able to have members of our design team come in and give presentations to the class. And we were actually involved in ranking and reviewing documents that they provided. And so we really thought that it was important for us as professionals to pass on that knowledge to the younger generation. And what's actually kind of unique about this project is when I was a student at NMSU, my capstone class was actually to design the bridge of University over I-25. And one of my industry partners that came in was actually Jerry Paz, who ended up being my boss. And so that's something that it's amazing how something such as simple as collaborating with the NMSU can lead to that job creation and future development of the workforce. The next credit here is QL 2.2, which is minimizing noise and vibration. Well, this project, we really didn't have to apply this credit because we had done noise studies just like we do for typical projects, but there was no significant reduction in the noise level if we were to put in noise walls. And so while this project specifically did not meet this credit, I wanted to point out that the normal process that the NMDOT follows, which includes noise studies, vibration monitoring during construction, all of those things that we do every day are part of the Envision certification and Envision credit rating system.
QL 2.3 is about minimizing light pollution. So we'll just talk briefly about this. The intention of this project is to look at the context, right? Some cities, they have that glow and it's bright, and one project isn't going to change that. But we have to understand the context. And Las Cruces is a fairly small community with relatively dark skies. And so for this project, one of the elements that we included was the removal of several high-mast lights that provide a lot more light pollution. And we took those lights and converted them down into LEDs at street level. And so not only does that save on energy costs, but it also improves the light pollution significantly for the community. QL 2.4 is improving community mobility and access. So this is a credit that's going to be the focus of almost every single transportation project. Now there's other projects that you could do for Envision, and it's going to, you're going to have to work harder to meet this credit. But for this project, we were able to meet this credit very easily because the entire purpose of this project is to improve mobility and access. So we've talked about this quite a bit now already, but we were able to improve level of service and a lot of the metrics, as well as improving mobility for multimodal access of pedestrians. That's of course related, and if you're getting the feeling, a lot of these credits have interaction with each other. You get points in one credit and you're going to get points in another credit. So QL 2.5 is about encouraging alternative modes of transportation. Now, alternative modes of transportation include things like bicyclists, pedestrians, public transit. And again, the context of a project is very, very key when you're thinking about alternative transportation modes. And as we discovered on this project, alternative transit doesn't have to be an extremely large cost item. A lot of times it's the same amount of materials, you're just orienting things a little bit differently to provide a higher level of comfort and safety for pedestrians or bicyclists. And actually on this project, early on in the design phase, the city of Las Cruces provided a training from the National Association of City Transportation Officials, NACTO, who has a design guide that provides a lot of tips and tricks for how to develop bicycle lanes and pedestrian facilities in a way that is better than maybe what we are exposed to right now. So it was a really good timing from the city because we were able to implement a number of those elements onto this project. So here in this image, you see some of the things that we did from an alternative transportation modes. So the dark blue lines are the existing multi-use trails that are in the area. You can see here that there's a Traverse Trail to the north and the Cisparo Trail system to the south, as well as a connection to the NMSU pedestrian network. But these things are not connected. And a lot of times, if you're familiar with the area, you'll see people come all the way up to the end of the Traverse Trail, come up to the intersection, stop at the light, and turn around and go back the other way because they just don't want to cross that busy intersection. And so you can see here with the green light, this is the extension and the connection of that trail network. And so we were able to demonstrate that we brought some revitalization into each of these existing infrastructure networks by connecting them and allowing people to have an easy and safe way of accessing these networks. And that improves not only transportation effectiveness, but also recreational opportunities. In addition, you have bicycle lanes on Traverse and University and new sidewalk in all directions, particularly across the I-25 University Bridge, which provides a critical link to the medical and residential areas to the east of this project. QL 2.6 is also fairly closely linked, and that involves providing site accessibility, safety, and wayfinding. So this is all thinking about what's the experience of using this project. Is it easy to navigate? And most importantly, it does improve safety. Now, the existing intersections on this project have a pretty notorious reputation for being fairly dangerous and unfortunately even deadly at times. Not too long ago, a student lost her life going through this intersection. I think it was while we were in design for this project. And so that really brought into perspective the importance of safety. So a few of the safety elements are, of course, the roundabouts. And many people in the community are unfamiliar with roundabouts, but we just felt like it was something we couldn't not do because of the safety advantages of roundabouts. They can reduce injury crashes by as much as 70%. You may have just as many fender benders, but they're not going to be as deadly because you avoid those head-on and T-bone type accidents. So this was something we did for the safety improvement, and then other improvements to the intersections and especially to the bicycle and sidewalk facilities are expected to improve safety for all users significantly.
QL 3.1 is actually something that we didn't have to do on this project, but it is, again, one of those credits that is involved and something that we do as part of the NEPA process. So QL 3.1 is to preserve historic and cultural resources. With this project and with all federal projects, we do a cultural resources report where we do the surveys, we look at all of the findings of those surveys, and then if there's anything that is culturally significant, we look at ways of preserving that or mitigating that. So this is another way, while it didn't apply on this project, that you can get points by just following the simple process.
QL 3.2 and 3.3 are closely related, and they affect the aesthetics and the local character of a project. Now, as most of you know, this interchange is old, and it's just old gray concrete. It doesn't have hardly any aesthetic improvements but at the same time, it provides a gateway into the city of Las Cruces as well as NMSU. And so there was quite a bit of motivation and collaboration that went behind creating this, making this project beautiful, something that the community could stand behind and be excited about and be proud of. So Wyatt's going to talk a little bit more about some of the elements of this project and the way we develop the arts.
So I'm going to actually open up to another poll question. And poll question number 3 is, have you ever used Cafe? And you have 3 choices here. Yes, it's a great tool for public art. No, but I've heard of it. No, I don't like coffee. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to answer that question, and I'll go ahead and continue on just for the sake of time. So what we did for this project is we recognize that need for aesthetic improvements. And so what the DOT does at this point is they do what's called visual impact assessment, or VIA. And that determines if a project should have public art. And for this project, we determined that it was necessary for public art, and that became an environmental commitment that we had. And so the first step of the CAFE process is actually to form an art selection committee. And so we did this again with that stakeholder group that we had, which included NMDOT representatives, NMSU representatives, including the NMSU architect and the NMSU art department head. And then we had representatives from the city of Las Cruces. We had the mayor pro tem and the city landscape architect. And then we also had some local artists be a part of that committee. And the first step that that committee has to do is they have to develop a prospectus. And really what that is that defines the project. It defines what the artist is to do. And so what we, as the art selection committee, determined was that this was a gateway, as Andrew mentioned, 1 to the city of Las Cruces and 2 to NMSU. And so we really wanted that to be a theme of this. And so we put that in the prospectus. Another requirement that we had was that the artist had to be New Mexico based. We wanted somebody that knew our region, knew our community, and so that the art reflected our community. And then it also gives the basic description of requirements, what the fees are going to be, what they're going to be paid, things like that. And so when we did this, we actually had 26 artists that applied originally. We had a meeting with the art selection committee, and we screened those 26 down to the top 6. Those top 6 were given a $500 stipend, and they were asked to come and give an in-person interview of what their vision was for this interchange. Typically at this point, those artists would be screened down to the recommended artist, and that one artist would be chosen. However, we had 2 artists that were very, very impressive, and so we couldn't make a decision. And so we asked them to come back again, provide us a little bit more information. And so they were interviewed again, and then one artist was selected, and that is Colette Marie, who is a Las Cruces native. So what I want to do is walk you through what her vision was for this. And you can see how she, as the artist, was able to provide information to us as the design team, which we were then able to put into the plans. And now the contractor is out there actually constructing this. And so this is the bridge over I-25 at University Avenue. And so you can see that she has various designs on here. On the wing walls, she has the New Mexico whip-tailed lizard, and then also a native New Mexican design here. And then on the pedestrian railing, rather than just use the standard chain link fencing pedestrian railing that we often do, we incorporated a different kind of pedestrian railing that included this artwork. And so it is includes the city of Las Cruces on here with the sunburst and all of these native triangles. And you can see on these next pictures what it actually looks like, how it's able to come to life. And then on the abutments, she also incorporated kind of a larger than life natural art. And so on the left here, you can see that she has the ocotillo plant, and then on the right, the agave. And then she also incorporated throughout this entire art is bees. She recognized that bees are very important to our ecosystem. And so you can see, incorporated them throughout the entire process. And then this bird is actually something that was inspired by her grandmother. And so it was just little things that she incorporated to make this art not only fit the place, but also her local flavor. So you can see what this looks like up close in real life. These pictures were actually taken yesterday. They're actually actively painting the bridge right now. And so it's really nice to drive through and see how much it's really coming to life and changing every day. Again, the I-25, the bridge that crossed the southbound off-ramp and Traverse under University Avenue, again, was that gateway to NMSU. And so again, Colette used NM State on the pedestrian railing, and then she incorporated a diamond pattern on the concrete wall barrier. And then in the center pier, there's all of these arches that were incorporated in there. And then again, she had a simple pattern that was on there. Something that we did put on both bridges just for some additional aesthetic features were these pilasters that came up above the pier cap and stick up in the air. And so this is just another feature just to make this area more beautiful. So you can see here's the pictures of what that looks like now. And something that's really important here is that while the bridge that's going to carry I-25 traffic is going to be much higher speed, this bridge is going to be having traffic that's a much lower speed and also pedestrians. And so they're really going to be able to enjoy this art, look through these arches and see all of the detail that has been put into this. Again, on the abutments, she's incorporated more native plants. NMSU is an ag college, and so she incorporated some of those ag themes. We have the cotton plant, we have the onion seed, and of course the green chili. And then she incorporated NM State on here. And so you can see that this is what it looks like after it's in construction. You can see the phase line of the bridge here. It's actually, part of it's been painted, part of it hasn't. And as this has been developed and we've been able to watch it grow, it's been very amazing at how the artwork has been really beautiful before it was even painted. It was really amazing to see how that art was really done. And you can see here, one of the very impressive features about Colette was that she was a graphic designer, is what she called herself. And so she did most of her art in a computer-based software. And so she actually provided details like this that we were able to simply put on the plan sheet, stamp and put out to the contractor. So you can see the details that she incorporated onto all of the stems of this agave plant and all of the bees. And so she calls out the colors, the relief, and then the contractor was able to obtain digital files, and then they were able to create these forms, which were then used to create the panels. And this was actually MSC walls that we are using on this entire project. And so the contractor actually had to figure out the way to form these panels so that they could have that repeating pattern so that they could save money. And so that was something that was quite an involved process on their end. And so here's another wall. You can see this is prior to it being painted. And then this is just yesterday. That again, that onion seed and that earth and seed pattern that she has going throughout the entire process here.
So we're going to start moving a little bit more quickly through the different credits. And the next section of Envision is called leadership. So we have another poll about what leadership means in relationship to sustainability. So leadership, is it coming up with a project logo and slogan? Does it mean that a project has sustainability on its website? A project collaborates and has teamwork between the owner, stakeholders, project team, and community? Or does it mean bringing snacks to the staff meeting? I think that's great leadership, personally. So LD 1.1 kind of answers a lot of those questions. It's about providing effective leadership and commitment. So the thing about sustainability is it's a buzzword. It's something that I've probably said 3 dozen times already in this presentation, and you'll see it everywhere. But the thing that Envision provides entities and organizations and companies is a way to move beyond lip service into actual demonstratable, verified, sustainable practices. So LD 1.1 is actually kind of self-fulfilled by Envision. If you are doing Envision, you're moving past lip service and you're moving into commitments and demonstratable examples of sustainable practices. And that's closely linked to LD 1.2, which is to establish a sustainability management system. This means, do you have people who are assigned to making sure that these things get done? It's nice to come up with lots of great ideas and brainstorm and dream, but taking those dreams to reality means you have to have resources and frameworks committed to making this happen. So for us, we had dozens of spreadsheets and committed hours to making sure that we were going to be able to follow through on the commitments that we had. LD 1.3 again is linked to it, and it's about fostering collaboration and teamwork. The Envision wants to make sure that project teams aren't just sitting there in their offices making these decisions that affect a whole community or city and just making them all by themselves. And so they want to make sure that there is real demonstrable collaboration with stakeholders and the community to make sure that the decisions that are being made for the community are being done by the community. So one of the Wyatt's mentioned a lot of the public involvement, but we had multiple and numerous stakeholder meetings with the city and with NMSU, with the art selection committee, with of course the NMDOT as the owner, to make sure that in the process of weeding down the alternatives, to make sure we're going to be serving all entities well and equally. And then finally, toward the end of the project, we had a value engineering meeting that you can see here in this picture, and post-COVID, it just looks weird to have that many people in the same room. But we had multidisciplinary teams, architects, geotechs, structurals, electrical engineers, of course, transportation engineers, and everybody in the same room to be able to look at the project, make sure there wasn't a fatal flaw, and identify ways that it could be made better and save money. So this was something that we used for this project. LD 2.1 is about pursuing byproduct synergy opportunities. Synergy, another buzzword. What this one means for this project is you're looking upstream and downstream of your project wastes and materials. So you're looking upstream, you're saying, what other projects are happening around my area, and are they generating waste that I could actually use on this project? Similarly, what kind of waste is this project going to generate? Do we have excess earthwork? Are we going to have millings? Are we going to have crushed concrete or steel? Where can these things go that would avoid going to a landfill and be able to create more of a synergistic way of the industry operating together? Our next example is kind of similar, but it's more within the project. It's about infrastructure integration. A lot of times, because engineers get specialized and we get specialized in specific areas, we tend to just solve our one problem, and we're not looking at how our system may provide opportunities or problems for other systems. So one of the things we did on this project is we worked closely with our landscape architect as we developed the drainage design. And we provided multiple stormwater harvesting opportunities throughout the entire project. And if you've ever driven down, a desert path, and you can see a lot of times by accident, a lot of times the landscaping was really, really struggling. And then by accident, there might be a tree that's planted next to a stormwater culvert, and that one tree happens to be doing really, really well because it just gets so much water from storm every time it rains. So that's something we were trying to do intentionally with this project by integrating the drainage design and the landscaping design.
LD 3.1 is actually planning for long-term monitoring and maintenance. And so that's making sure that you do simple things that make your life easier down the road. And some of the things that we incorporated on this project to help to minimize the maintenance that was required was we used PCCP concrete paving in the roundabouts. We have the two roundabouts as we have shown you. So there's a few hundred feet between those two roundabouts. And one of the decisions that our design team made in order to make this easier to maintain down the road was we went ahead and did concrete between those roundabouts. We also did concrete between the two bridges. They're only, again, separated by a few hundred feet. So rather than have a few hundred feet of asphalt, we went ahead and put in PCCP. So not only will that section of the bridge last longer, but also will the roadway will as well, with the turning movements and things like that. Other things that we looked at for maintenance included riprap on the slopes. We had a lot of slopes that were 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and we could have gone with the standard route of a Class C or a Class A seating on those slopes. However, we wanted to make this where it was easy to maintain or almost maintenance free from a erosion standpoint. And so we put in that Class G riprap on the slopes. And we didn't want it to just be gray rock on these slopes with all these beautiful painted walls. We incorporated different colors of riprap and different patterns into that riprap so that it really beautifies the area and creates that minimal maintenance in the future. LD 3.3 is extending the useful life of the project. We all know that now bridges are being designed for 50, 70 plus years. And so we didn't want to design these bridge structures and not think about the future of I-25 and the future of this area. And so with a little extra money up front, we were able to provide a bridge span that was just a little bit longer that allows for I-25 to be widened to 3 lanes in each direction in the future. It seems very trivial for something to do, but something simple as adding a few $100,000 now can save millions later. And another way that that can be done would maybe be to add additional inch to your asphalt lift or things like that.
Okay, so moving on to the next credit category, we have resource allocation. So getting to the website, we have another poll here about what resource allocation means. A, B, C, D, and of course, everybody's favorite is E. So starting off with RA 1.1, we're looking at reducing the net embodied energy. Net embodied energy looks at the energy that is taken in, that's consumed by the creation of the materials all the way until deconstruction. So this is a pretty involved process, and for future reference, if we were to do this again, we would probably hire a professional there are professionals that specialize in being able to develop these types of analysis. So this was one that we weren't able to get points on, but if we were to do it again, there would be some pretty easy points that we could get. And not only does that apply to this credit, but doing that analysis actually applies to a number of other credits down the line. RA 1.2 is about supporting sustainable procurement practices. And again, we include this not because it was something that we were able to implement on this project, but it is maybe an area that as an industry we could improve. And that is by developing standards for procurement from manufacturers to say, are you guys to encourage sustainable practices in our manufacturers as well?
RA 1.3 is the use of recycled materials. And really, this is something that contractors do a very good job of without even any requirement for sustainability. A contractor that's going to get the job often has found ways to save money by reusing materials. So they may crush the existing concrete to use it for backfill. They're going to use millings that they can send back and put in wrap for asphalt. Or maybe they're going to take the time to separate the reinforcing from the concrete so that they can go and sell that steel and get some money back. And so this is something that contractors do a very good job of. And so it was easier for us to demonstrate that this credit was met. Something that we did on this project to make sure that the contractor actually did follow through with the sustainable practices that we had done through the planning and design is we wrote a special provision for sustainable practices. And this special provision didn't actually put requirements on the contractors. We did put goals in here, but we didn't want this to become something that was going to drive up the cost significantly on the project, especially for the very first time that it's being used on a DOT project. And so we set goals, and those goals have been very easy for the contractor to achieve just by following their standard processes that they follow. So in order to do this, in order to pay for this, because of course you set out a special provision, you need to be able to pay for it. So we actually established 2 item numbers. We have an Envision certification fee, which was a a fee for the certification and the documentation of Envision and the third-party verification. And then we had an Envision documentation fee, and this was basically for the contractor's time to provide the documentation to us so that we could upload it into the website. And then RA 1.4 is the use of regional materials. Here in Southern New Mexico, we are really blessed and fortunate to have lots of native materials available, including we have 2 asphalt and aggregate plants that are just to the south of this project, about 10 miles. And so that really helps minimize the transportation costs and impacts to the region by bringing in materials from the outside. I do want to give you an example of a way that something may seem sustainable, but really it may not be. So we worked on a project about 10 years ago that was actually a LEEDS project for a building. And one of the credits that we were looking for was a way to do something with the stormwater, some stormwater harvesting. And so we incorporated pervious concrete pavement into our design and specifications for that project. Well, that all seems great. You're gonna use that stormwater. You're gonna capture that and not just put it into a storm drain system that's gonna go to a pond where it's gonna grow mosquitoes and then finally evaporate. But in order to do this, the contractor actually brought in resources from St. Louis. They brought in the labor force for St. Louis, and they brought in the materials from St. Louis. So while it was a good product, the actual sustainability of it wasn't very good. We have aggregate plants and concrete plants just up the road, but they shipped all of these materials in, all of these employees in to do this. And so Envision recognizes that that's really not sustainable, that you should use your local regional materials and regional workforce.
Our RA 1.5 is about diverting waste from landfills. And obviously this is something that many contractors already try to do. If they're gonna have a way to reuse something on site, they're going to do that. Now, initially we thought that this credit involved just construction waste, but this credit in version 2 of Envision is actually more focused on operations waste. So that's for some sort of wastewater treatment plant that has sludge and is generating sludge on a weekly basis, and where is that waste stream going to go? And one of the neat things about Envision is that they are developing and continuing to improve as an organization and as a system. And so version 3 recognized that construction waste also needs to be accounted for. And so version 3 looks at both construction and operations waste, where it's going and how much, what percentage of it is being diverted from landfills. RA 1.6 is related, but it's talking about earthwork. This is, again, we want to show that this system is very, many of the credits are very familiar to engineers. Most engineers are kind of obsessed with getting their site balanced. And so this is all that is are you keeping your materials on site and finding ways to use it? And if you can demonstrate that you use 100% of it, that's top credits. RA 1.7 is looking not just at the deconstruction that you have to do for your project, but what's going to happen to your project in the future. So again, many of the materials that civil engineers use are very recyclable in the future. Asphalt, concrete, and steel can all be broken down and reused. But there are other types of construction that may use complex composite materials or process them in a specific way that makes it difficult to reuse. And so this credit is meant to try to discourage that, so that when a project goes to, reaches the end of its life cycle, it can be broken down and the materials reused again. RA 2.1, we kind of talked about this with the light pollution. Previously, this project had high mass lighting with a bunch of sodium bulbs, and we basically took those and brought them down and sent the lights to us to be reused somewhere else, the materials, and then replaced them with LED lights. And just by replacing with LED, we were able to demonstrate that the energy cost for lighting this interchange would be reduced by 40%. RA 2.2 is about using renewable energy. This is something that we tried to look into and see if we were able to do, but we're unable to bring into this project. But it may be something that as an industry we could grow in, and that is how can we bring renewable energy into our projects, especially in very remote areas and things like that. RA 2.3 is about taking those energy systems and making sure that they're operating properly. Again, this is another one that if we had more experience with Envision, we would have been able to build in systems to be able to achieve this credit, but because we were kind of new at it, we weren't able to. It's not that much more work. It's just about making sure that there is a third-party entity on site to make sure that the energy systems are operating the way they were meant to.
RA 3.2 is actually reducing potable water consumption. Something that we had talked about and we met with our stakeholders, the city and NMSU on, was their desire to landscape this area, being that it was a gateway. So the NMDOT was going to provide the artwork and all of the riprap on the slopes, and the city and NMSU are going to come in and landscape it. The city of Las Cruces actually incorporated funds into this project so that the landscaping could be done as part of this project. And so the initial talks about this interchange and the landscaping here was a lush landscape. And so what that means is we didn't really know, but we didn't want to come in and put grass and non-native species along this interchange in the desert Southwest that were going to take a lot of water. And so what we did is we planted native species throughout here. And as Andrew mentioned before, we used water harvesting through swells and our natural drainage ponds that we were going to need anyway. And all of these things are able to reduce that potable water consumption while still providing a beautiful landscaping in the area. The next credit here is the natural world. And again, we're going to have one more poll here. And the natural world is really the setting, the land and water, biodiversity, innovation, and need. You guys want to go ahead and vote on that one. And then the first part of the natural world, there's lots of these credits that kind of get lumped together, and they follow our standard NEPA process. With any federal funded project, we need to follow the NEPA process. We all know that. And so you can see the NEPA process and what's made up of it in this bottom image here. And if you look at the credits on the top here, they all align very well with NEPA. Preserve the natural habitat, that's a NEPA thing. Protect the wetlands and surface water. Again, that's part of NEPA. Preserve prime farmland, preserve greenfields, protect biodiversity species, control invasive species, maintain wetlands. All of those things are part of the NEPA process. So again, this is an area that just by following the standard process, we're able to gain credits in the Envision process.
One of the credits that we want to highlight was Natural World 1.6, which is about preserving the floodplain functions. This is another credit that engineers typically do quite well in because the NMDOT or cities drainage design processes take into account floodplain, and you have to design for the 50 or 25 or 100-year floods. And so this one, just by doing our standard design process, we were able to achieve some points, and then it also encouraged us to improve even further than what might be standard. Similarly, Natural World 2.1 is about managing stormwater, and the goal here is to take the infiltration levels to pre-development pre-development levels. So not only are you capturing the additional water generated by your impervious systems, but you're looking at what was it like before, and are you able to capture that water and return it back to the aquifer through infiltration. Here we have Natural World 2.2 and 2.3, and these are about pollution and contaminants. We know that looking at the bees on the the artwork, we don't want bees to be only on artwork, but bees populations in the country have dropped dramatically, and one of the things that people are pointing to is pesticides. So this would be an area that a lot of places have their standard pesticide use, and the question is can we improve that to reduce the amount of pesticides that were not affecting native species as strongly. Natural World 3.3 is about restoring your disturbed soils, restoring disturbed soils. Disturbed soils can't hold nutrients and they are very susceptible to erosion. So usually there is some level made to restore disturbed soils, but it's something that we thought on this project to put more energy in, as Wyatt mentioned, additional riprap, additional landscaping and seeding, and avoiding those steep slopes so that you can seed it all you want, but it's just going to wash away because the seeds can't take. So this was, we got credits for this one for restoring 100% and even more than restoring previously disturbed soils as well. Okay, last category is climate and risk. So we have one more poll about what climate and risk means. And I want to highlight here that adjusting the thermostat without asking your spouse is climate related and very, very risky.
Especially for you.
Especially for me, because I have a pregnant wife. So I've learned that lesson the hard way. So the purpose of this category is to not contribute to further climate change by with our emissions, and then also acknowledging that climate change has already happened and will continue to happen. Can our projects adapt and respond to the changing environment that they're going to be in? So CR 1.1 is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, this is something that we all want to do, but it's hard to quantify. So this is another one that we would have needed to have a professional that could do a life cycle carbon analysis to demonstrate that this project would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We believe that it would have because of the taking cars off the road and creating additional efficiency and reducing delays at intersections. Likewise, CR 1.2 is about reducing air pollutants, and that is again something that we would have been able to prove and maybe could have if we had the chance to hire a professional to do that. CR 2.1 is about assessing climate threat, and that's related to the following two credits as well, which are about preparing for long-term adaptability, which is what's going to happen in the future. Are our 100-year storms actually going to become more like 50-year storms? Our temperature is going to get more hot, and we have to account for that with our materials. Are there going to be more frequent severe storms? And then likewise, CR 2.4 is about preparing for short-term hazards. So for all these risk assessment categories, we developed risk spreadsheets that looked at each of the hazards and analyzed the frequency as well as how the project would respond. And we built in some additional capacity to stormwater, additional capacity to not being dependent on water and energy for our landscaping and lighting as much. And that would be able to help the project be more, the design be more resilient in the future. And then this is something that we can pass along to the owners and to NMSU and other stakeholders so that they can be aware of the types of hazards that this project may be susceptible to and the types of responses that would be needed. This was just something that we'll develop and pass along to close out the project to make sure that people are aware of this. The final credit we're going to look at here is CR 2.5, and that's about managing heat island effects. This is one that I think we are aware of when you go to a big city and the temperature is 5 to 10, 15 degrees warmer than the surrounding areas because of how much thermal mass is built into the streets and how it absorbs that heat. this is just all about reducing the solar reflectance index. New asphalt is basically the standard for the worst level of solar reflectance. Black, it gets a score of 0. But concrete, for example, has a solar reflectance of 80, and so it actually performs a lot better. So that's something to keep in mind in our design. Is in the places where heat island is a problem, can we use additional concrete rather than just using asphalt?
So now that we've gone through the large majority of the Envision credits and shown you how it all applies to the university interchange, I want to walk you through kind of the final product here. So as you guys can remember, the 4 goals that we had right at the beginning were 1, to provide access from I-25 southbound into the NMSU campus. And we did this with the southbound off-ramp that goes under University Avenue into the large roundabout on the south side of University Avenue. Our other goal was to provide a grade separation for Traverse, which we did that as well, which is tied together with 2 roundabouts. That not only allows for traffic to be reduced at the signalized intersection here, which will reduce the delay along University Avenue, but it also provides a different way for pedestrians to cross University Avenue and a much safer way for them to cross. And one of the other things that was in our goals was to improve the pedestrian and ADA facilities. And so as Andrew pointed out earlier, we did extend the trail system and the trail network throughout this corridor. And something that we did is we didn't put any pedestrian crossings on interstate ramps. So you can see all of our crossings are on the local streets where traffic should be slower and people are more expecting a pedestrian to be there. And we also met that final goal of putting a ramp from NMSU onto I-25 southbound. And so you can see just by following the process, we were able to meet the goals, but we were also able to do little things such as using the ponds and using stormwater harvesting to develop this. And so really following the process allowed us to create a new interchange, which meets all of our goals, but also is going to be a beauty for the community in years to come.
So I'm sure many people are wondering just how much work is the Envision process, and it is a good amount of work. But what I appreciate about it is that it is, for the most part, not busy work. It's work that you're doing to make sure that the design is progressing the direction that you want it to progress. And so a couple of tips and tricks that I have as far as using this process is using the checklist very early on. As I mentioned, this can be used as a brainstorming tool. Whether or not you're going to get the project verified, it helps designers and planners think a little bit outside the box and think of other areas for your project to be sustainable. Second tip is documentation. There are conversations that I know we had at meetings and would have made my life a lot easier, but it just never got written down. And so documentation is key for this process, along with getting organized. Naturally, you're going to have documents and you've got to have a good system, spreadsheets, file systems to get this organized. So get familiar with the process and get organized. And next, of course, register the project early. The verification fee comes at the end to get it verified, but you can get the project registered earlier, and that enables you to ask questions and get connected to the Envision staff, and they are very, very helpful in helping you get your project across the finish line.
And so I want to talk about finally some sustainability lessons learned. And the first one is good engineering is sustainable engineering. As civil engineers, if we're really doing our job, we are creating a sustainable product. We are creating a lasting impact, and something that's really good engineering is really sustainability. And so what that involves is looking at the big picture. As we kind of talked about, often we are specialized in certain things, and so we put blinders on and we don't look at the big picture. And so in order to be truly sustainable, we need to take a step back and look at how this project and how the individual thing that we are working on impacts the entire project, maybe the community and the region. Something else that we found was that recycling is often harder than reusing. There's often not a place to take some of these materials, but as we mentioned, contractors are very good at reusing materials. And so That's something that was easier than we often thought would be. Extending the useful life of a project is also easier than we expected. It could be something as simple as putting Class G riprap on a slope, or as easy as adding another ½ inch of asphalt to your pavement design. All of those things are simple things that can extend the useful life of your project. And then finally, stakeholder and public involvement is key. You can create a project that you, as the design engineer, thinks is great, but we know that if the public and the stakeholders don't like it, then it doesn't really, it's a sustainable project, and it isn't a project that is going to create a lasting impact in the community. And so to wrap things up, what we want to do is leave you with a challenge. We want you guys to take one of your projects that you are working on right now and find one way that you can create something that is more sustainable. I don't know what that's going to be. Maybe it's involving your stakeholders more. Maybe it's going to be putting different slopes in. Maybe it's adding in some stormwater harvesting. But simple thing we want you guys to take away from this is to find one way that you can make your project more sustainable.